reading what he has to say on page 35. And the arrests another billionaire drug baron in Lagos, and you can find that on page 33. Still on the 2023 election, Aliyu Shekaro, Haruna and others rally support for Atiku, and the rider says slam Tinubu over fitness video. PTP crisis will be over soon, says ex-board of trustee chairman. Edo stakeholders call for Dan Oribi sacking. And the big story on this day, Rivers APC to APC governors visiting Wike and embarrassment to our party, threatens to take matters into his own hands if national leadership fails to do something. And there's a picture story redefining agriculture in Nigeria for the future, and there we can see the current vice president of the country. And that's all the news on this day.
On the Vanguard newspaper, we have boy shot 12-year-old brother to death while testing the bulletproof charm, which you can read on page 4. And we have Mina Bida highway collapses, a fresh traveler stranded. And you can read that also on page 11. And we have a big interview, how we are winning the drug war. This is coming from Brigadier General Brawi, that's the NDLEA chairman. And on Forex, turnover in the INE rises 34% to $27 billion in 9 months. That can be found on page 19. Big story here says anger wells up in APC over party leaders wooing Wike. The writer says River APC vows not to support Ashwaju if, and we have demands 25% refund of forms proceed. Accuses Buhari of neglecting Rivers APC. There are honest issues we will address. This is coming from Gidom. And we have grumbling over APC's dormant. This is coming from the NEC. And campaign council meets today as Tinubu returns this week. Well, if they say Tinubu is returning this week and they say he's not on a health trip or whatever it is, so we just hope to hear where is he returning from. So if you want to know where he is returning from, you can read that story on page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper. And Bajabia Miller says Nigeria needs leaders with capacity and character. And on terrorism, leech headers were merchandise from Sudan. This is coming from the Birningwari villagers. And on the PDP campaign's anxiety over composition of subcommittees, release of timetable. And list of the national honors nominees fake. This is coming from the federal government. You can follow up that on page 6. And we have the last story, which is on 2023. We beg God to give us best among Atiku, Tinubu and Obi. This is coming from Sirking Hausa. And we have a picture story here where we can see the former governor of Niger State, Muazu Babangida Aliyu on Monday in Abeokuta, Ogun State capital, to campaign for the People's Democratic Party presidential candidate Alhaji Atiku Abubakar as the most qualified person to take over from the President Muhammadu Buhari next year. We can see him and with other people that were together with him during the campaign there in Abeokuta. And that's all on the Vanguard newspaper.
On the Daily Sun newspaper, Ohaneze insists on Igbo president, says agitations against marginalization by Southeast justified. Still on 2023 election, Konkoso not spoiler. This is coming from NNPP, and you can read that on page 27. And the big story on Daily Sun, PDP G5 gives Atiku condition for support, and the rider says party's presidential candidate under pressure to succumb. Crisis will soon be over. This is coming from Jibril, ex-BOT chairman, and you can read that on page 6. And on the right side of the paper, federal government considers China's newly certified plane for Nigeria Air. NDLEA arrests Lagos billionaire drug baron, recovers 8.8 billion naira worth of tramadol. Rivers APC tackles Southwest governor over romance with Wike. And you can read that on page 27. This is coming from the presidency. PFN advises Nigerians on candidate and party to vote. And you can read out on page 6. And at the middle of the page, there's a picture story. Houses submerged in Lokoja, Kogi State after downpour yesterday. And still on the Daily Sun, Nigeria needs leaders with capacity. This is coming from Bajabi Amila. And you can read all that he has to say on page 26. And on the downside of the paper, police to probe attack on Obi's supporters. This is coming from PPRO, and you can read that on page 5. And that's all the news on Daily Sun.
On the Nation newspaper, NDLEA seizes 8.8 billion naira tramadol pills in raid of Lagos mansion. And we have Unilag to get new vice chancellor on Friday. I'm not a social media freak, says Kwankwaso. You can read that on page 5. The big story on the Nation is on presidency, why Tinubu is best for the job. This is coming by Al Makura. The writer say ex-governor says Atiku, Obi, Kwankwaso no match for the APC candidate competence. And the picture story here, we can see women rallying for Tinubu and Shetima Sanwo-Olu in Lagos, which you can read on page 4. And we have a story here that said Nigeria and others tackling exchange rate crisis, says the World Bank. And here it says the World Bank Group says Nigeria and other economic challenges, including exchange rate crisis. It says in the 2022 country policy and institutional assessment as the CPIA reports that the development reflected improved monetary and exchange rate policies. Analysis of the report shows that Rwanda maintained its highest CPIA scores of 4.1, leading the rankings for the 7th year in a row. Kenya improved slightly with an average score of 3.8, joining Cabo Verde with its unchanged score of 3.8. And Nigeria was number 21 on the list behind Benin Republic and Senegal, which achieve an average score of 3.7. And that means we have more to do. If we're having Rwanda, you begin to wonder questions like Rwanda that was faced with 1 or 2 challenges, and we're seeing that they are actually doing so much when it comes to their policy, their exchange rates, and how to even improve on their own currency. And here in the country, we are number 21 on the sub-Sahara country. So you know that a lot needs to be done when it comes to improving our own policy so that our exchange rate, and then we need to look at how we have to consume more rather than keep importing. Let us consume our own local products, and I think that will actually help us to improve our own currency and also to stabilize our own economy as it is presently.
And you know, Sarah, the thing is that the more that we read this news, the more you realize that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And to be honest, if every sector, every ministry, every group, everybody should do his work in this country, truly we can grow, we can be better, we can reach heights that we don't even think we can reach. And you can see different sectors trying in their best, and you can see with the NDLEA how they are fighting drugs. And imagine if everybody, we keep looking at floods, we have ministries of land and survey. These are people that, for example, are charged with the responsibility of surveying places ahead of time and telling people, okay, you know what, this place is not convenient for building, don't build here. In 10 years time it will be flooded. In 20 years, you understand, when every sector will do its job in this country diligently, like do your work, we will grow and will be better, and you will see that a lot of things can be avoided. But because somewhere,
if only we channel our energy to the productive sectors in the country. Well, we have Ohaneze against violent agitation, which you can read on page 23, still on the Nation newspaper. And we have George Powers set to sell 250 billion naira shares. We have Nigerian Exchange Police first quarter power rule, which you can read on page 4. And that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On the Nigerian Tribune, lynched headers were terrorists from Sudan. BEPU replies Kaduna government. And you can read that on page 5. 3-story building collapses in Ibadan. How flood crippled the north. Thousands render hopeless and then going through in Kogi. And there is the governor of that state, going to these committees. I hope it's not just about going, but that something will be done about it. If not, next year they will still be in that boat going to solicit with these people. But rather than this happening, let something be done, that the next time the governor is going there, be it for whatever reason, it won't be in a boat, but that he is walking on dry grounds. I hope that something is done about that. And the big story on the Nigerian Tribune, and the LEA seizes 13 million pills of tramadol from VGC mansion. And the writer for that story, how intelligence reporters reveal timing, more seizure on the way, agency says. And you can read all of that on page 3. And on the left side of the paper, for the national honors, authentic list of nominees not yet released. The federal government is saying so. Buhari to present 2023 budget to the National Assembly. Worshippers kick as Father Mbaka goes to monastery. And you can read out on page 3. And on the right side of the paper, Nigerians can no longer be deceived by APC. This is coming from Babangida Aliyu. And the writer says, declare Atiku as healthiest of all candidates. And I would like to say there are many other candidates who are very healthy. So when you are voting, know that Atiku is not the only healthiest candidate. There are other candidates that are very competent and healthy also. And still on that story, Yorubas have had their turn. This is coming from Adebutu. And contending issues in PDP to be resolved soon, ex-Board of Trustee Chairman Jibrin says. And you can read all of that on page 23 and out all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
And on the metrics, we have an international story where we can see Pope Francis begs Putin to end the spiral of violence dead in Ukraine. Pope Francis has for the first time directed appeal to the Russian President Putin to stop the spiral of violence and death in Ukraine, saying that he haunted by the rivers of blood and tears. The head of the Catholic Church also condemned the annexation. We are aware that last week, actually, that was what the president of Russia did. He actually had some of the parts of Ukraine, about 4, like say, cities over there in Ukraine. He has actually annexed such part of it. So, you know, here we are seeing that Pope Francis had to come in to actually appeal to the president to actually, you know, readdress his steps he's putting, because there are a lot of talks coming left, right, and center concerning what the president of Russia is doing and all of that. So we just keep our fingers crossed that we can see that this has also affected. We know that Russia is one of the world powers when it comes to oil-producing countries. So we hope that they'll be able to put an end to all of this crisis and conflict that is going on between Ukraine and Russia, and so that we can move forward, because what affects one part of the country can actually affect the entire world at the end of the day. So we hope that we'll look into that too. Federal government denies list of the national honors nominees in circulation, which you can read inside the Metrics newspaper. We have domestic debt. Lagos, Delta, Ogun, Rivers lead as states borrow. You can read most of that from as of June 30th, 2022. The metrics have learned that Lagos, Delta, and Ogun are the 3 states in Nigeria with the highest domestic debt level. So you can actually read, even though there are many other states, so you can read more about the number 1, number 2, number 3, and other states that are actually leading in the domestic debts. The big story, which is on 2023, it has Muslim ticket Buhaha, and we have Christian religious bodies soft pendal on the opposition, and we have the Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria tell Nigerians to vote competence, not religion. And we have on defamation, Trump slams the $475 million lawsuit against CNN. How 12-year-old boy was shot to death by his brother while testing bulletproof charm. And we have the second Niger bridge ready for use by Christmas 2022. This is coming from the federal government. And we can see the picture story here. The drug mansion, Lekki mansion, where 8.8 billion naira worth of tramadol was found. We can see the cartons of that. And we really have to, give kudos to the NDLA. They have been doing so much, this year, especially the last quarter. They actually saved the best for the last, and we're really happy with all they're doing. We hope other agencies will also learn from this and also be up and about taking up their responsibilities as is expected of them. The last story I'll be taking here, South PDP youths call for the National Vice Chairman resignation, which you can read all of that on the Metrics newspaper, and that's all on the Metrics.
On Nigerian News Direct, amidst Independence holiday, APC PDP Labour Party's presidential campaign rocks Southwest with large turnout. EcoBank, Zenith Bank, others report 5.6% growth in deposit to 34.3 trillion naira, and this is the first half report of 2022. Nigeria re-elected as ITU Council member. And the big story on the Nigerian News Direct, NDLA arrests another billionaire drug baron in Lagos, recovers 8.8 billion naira worth of tramadol from mansion in residential estate. And you can read that on page 12. And on the downside of the paper, Osun APC Global Primary, Federal High Court judgment dead on arrival. Ayatollah's counsel, Ibrahim Lawan. SON Lupin to strengthen collaboration on enforcement of lubricant standard. And you can find that news on page 2. And there are picture stories on the Nigerian News Direct. If you want to know what it's all about, you can get the newspaper for yourself. And that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
Thank you, Rachel, for that, that paper review. Well, we'd like to take a time out right now where we can open the phone lines for our callers. So you could call us and let us hear what do you feel about most of the stories that are leading on the papers. And also you can drop your comment on our official Facebook page or YouTube. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies on Echo Television International. We've been looking at various stories that have been trending on our papers. Please do well to drop your comment on our Facebook page, and you can call us with our numbers that are displayed on your screen right now. So let us hear what you feel about it. And please, when you call us, endeavor to move away from your TV set or turn down the volume completely so that we can actually have a very good conversation. And still on the paper review, let's take a look at the New Telegraph newspaper, where we have the IMF food fertilizer cost to erode Nigeria and others reserve, with the rider global stock fall to lowest since late 2020. The international reserve, low-income countries in Africa, Middle East and Asia will erode further due to the rising food and fertilizer costs, the International Monetary Fund have said. So if you want to know more detail about the story, you can look that up on the front page and also page 3 of the New Telegraph newspaper. Oil price jump ahead of the key OPEC meeting tomorrow, which you can read on page 6. And they have not met for a while. They will be meeting, looking at the fact that so much stress have been put on Saudi Arabia because they have been the ones producing most of the oil. So we'll actually keep our fingers crossed concerning the OPEC meeting that will be meeting tomorrow. Still on New Telegraph, we have Bajabia Mira, Nigeria needs leaders with capacity and character. And on Kaduna community to verify, we kill terrorists from Sudan, not headers. And we have Petcombers, the PFAs for giving gifts to RSA holders, which you can read on page 3 and 6. The big story on 2023 presidency, the Southwest at crossroads over Tinubu and Obi. Afenifere, ARG stick to their guns. YCE says restructuring will inform position. We have PDP candidate forum passes no confidence vote in IU 2 others, which you can read on page 4. And on Ally Phase 2, 9 sidelined ruling houses agree to present one candidate. UNILAG set to announce new Lagos billionaire's mansion recovers 8.8 billion naira worth of tramadol. Downside of the paper, we have a study that says taking folic acid lowers risks for suicide. Well, if you want to know if that is true or not, you can read up that on page 28. And that's all on the New Telegraph newspaper.
On the Point newspaper, the big story still in 2023 governorship and assembly polls. APC PDP orders to no fate today. And the writer says INEC to release candidates list. APC PDP may not retain power in some states. Lagos, Delta, Ogun top as states increase domestic debt to 5.28 trillion naira in 3 years. And on the downside of the paper, Kwankosoyin presidential race to win, says NNP scribe. Delta PDP wants APC candidates disqualified. Hunter's son shoots sibling dead, testing bulletproof charm procured by father. What a sad story. And that's all the news on the Point newspaper.
And on First News, we are opposed to violent agitation in Nigeria. This is coming from Ohanize. We have NDLEA, which is on all our papers, discovered 30 million pills of tramadol worth 8.8 billion naira in Lekki mansion. The big story for the First News says last minute deal. PDP article placed Southwest Southeast ahead 2023. Seat Senate presidency, SGF to both regions respectively. Why I resign as the PDP board of chairman. This is coming from Jibrin. So if you want to know why he did that, grab the First News and read more of that. Stop hopping. Support for party's presidential flag bearer if still on 2023, if Labour Party is elected, insecurity in Nigeria will end. This is coming from Dati Baba Ahmed. And still on 2023 polls, the pirate confraternity demands Buhari's neutrality, seek withdrawal of 3 REC nominees. And we have conferring education minister with national honor insult to Nigerian students. This is coming from the NAS Association. And Umahi speak on Tinubu's display of proof of life. And on 2023, Senate race, withdraw or face defeat. This is an advice coming from Apabio. And we have footballer collapses and dies on Lagos field. And I think more needs to be done concerning most of our footballers and also looking at the entertainment industry. Something needs to be done about that ministry and to make sure that they are well taken care of. So if you want to know more of that story, you can check that on First News. And that's all on the First News.
On the Daily Independent, Mbaka will return to Adoration Ministry after solitude. This is coming from the Catholic Church, and you can continue reading that on page 6. Federal government disowns national honors list in circulation. And the big story, Nigeria in their need of competent leaders, says young people getting fed up with incrementalist approach. This is coming from Baja Biamila. If you're healthy, you need not tell people, as Governor Aliyu mocks Tinubu, and you can read out on page 29. BEPU to Kaduna government. lynch henchmen were terrorists from Sudan. Still on PDP crisis, Ayu Anyanwu Damagum get 48 hours to resign or face legal action. And you can read about the PDP crisis on page 7 of the Daily Independent newspaper. Still on the Daily Independent, NDLEA arrests billionaire recovers 8.8 billion naira worth of tramadol. And still on the Daily Independent, use your votes to deliver Nigeria for impending collapse. This is coming from the PFN, and you can continue reading that story on page 6. And on the downside of paper, shades demand corpses of 9 members killed in Abuja. You can read that on page 6. And that's all the news on Daily Independent.
Let's take a look at what the Punch newspaper have, and on page 21 we have consumers get 1.12 trillion naira bill, pay 775 billion naira amid blackouts. Debt servicing on Nigerian Eurobound rises by 86%, which you can read on page 21. Over 400 fleeing Kuje inmates still at large, and we're still keeping our fingers crossed that all the inmates that escaped from Kuje prison will be, apprehended, because they really are dangerous at this point in time, because we don't know where they are, who they are mingling with. Let them not hold a community or even a family to ransom. So we hope that more will be done from our security agency to be able to apprehend those people and bring them to book soon. And we have scientists who extracted DNA from a 40,000-year-old bones win the Nobel Prize. It's really a good one, and we hope we also hear someone from Nigeria actually having the Nobel Prize. After we have Wale Soyinka, very few people are beginning to take the lead, so we are hoping that more Africans and also Nigerians will receive the Nobel Prize. And on the campaign, Buhari, Tinubu, Shetima wives receive appointment letters. You can read that more on page 27. The big story, which is on PDP crisis, Board of Trustee convenes emergency meeting to rescue Atiku's campaign. The writer says party board meets this week as pressure mounts on PDP chairman to throw in the towel. We can't go into polls divided. Will make needed sacrifice to move forward. This is coming from the Board of Trustee member. And we have Wabara lead reconciliation panel meets Atiku ahead of Tuesday Port Harcourt meeting with Wike. We have some picture story here. Fun during the independence. We see some of Abuja and also Lagos, where kids are actually having a fun time to actually celebrate Nigerians' independence. Downside, we have syndicate denies injecting child beggars. Police hunts the doctor. Well, I hope that the doctor, or whatever the issue is, they will actually address it. And we have a family saying U.S. flew Oyo hoteler killed by herdsmen home for burial. And that is all on the Punch newspaper.
On the Business Day newspaper, leaders who can manage change desperately needed. This coming from Bajabia Miller. Election outcomes must reflect people's will. You can continue reading all that he has to say on page 20. Nigerians' external reserves plunged to 1-year low. You can turn to page 21 and read that report. Gerogu Power set to go public at 100 naira per share, and you can find that on page 27. And the big story on the Business Day, Nigeria's 2023 borrowing plans at risk as creditors dry up. Eurobound road resumes, rising interest rate to push up domestic borrowing costs. And you can continue reading that report on What's Our Fate on page 20. Still on the Business Day newspaper, China, Nigeria's biggest bilateral creditors reduces lending. And you can turn and read that on page 4. Nigerian brand value hits $24 billion, highest in 3 years. And you can turn to page 21 for that report. And that's all the news and report on Business Day.
Still on the world of business, let's take a look at the Business Standard newspaper. Why rising manpower exports sees falling remittance. And you can look at the graph, looking at the paradox of manpower export rise and remittance drop. The trade of the manpower export from 2021 to 2022. Workers set abroad and the trend of remittance inflow. So you can read all of that and see what was received and what has been the the gap in percentage. We have the BFIO identifies more than 5,000 suspicious MFS account for digital holding. You can read more of that too on the Business Standard. And we have appeal exporters expect turnaround by June next year. Treasury bond exchange trading likely next week. This comes from the BB Governor. Explorer of Noble in medicine. India has $1.2 trillion planned to snatch factories from China. We can see countries actually, mounting so much now. Most time if you're not feeling fine, it's either your flights you're being flew to India or China or US, and we can see that India is trying as best as they can to snatch factories from China. Then that means Nigeria will also have to do something to snatch it also from India, because we have all that it takes. Believe you me, we have everything that you're talking about, the raw materials and everything. We have it. So I'm looking forward to that day, hopefully maybe in 2023 2024, that we'll be able to do that, because there's nothing that is impossible. If only we have the will, then we'll actually have whatever it is that is needed. And we have inflation fell significantly in September. This is coming from the planning minister. You can read that up on page 6 of the Business Standard newspaper, and that is all on the Business Standard.
On the Sporting Life newspaper, even Ronaldo, Messi lose confidence. This is coming from Klopp, the Liverpool manager. Upamecano confident of victory. This is Bayern versus Victoria. And then Blues will rise the tempo. This is for the Champions League. And then Foden to sign new Man City contract this week. Messi still a class above Haaland. That's very true, but Haaland is very young and is upcoming, so there's more to see from him. I sense my mate wants to destroy Man United. Klopp pleads for patience over newness. Still on the Sporting Life, I feel rewarded at Barca. This is coming from Lewandowski. The young dropped for Inter versus Barcelona match. And this is for Ajax versus Napoli. Victor Osimhen out. Nigerian still recovering from a muscle injury. Simeon or Raspadori to replace Super Eagles striker. For the Inter Milan versus Barcelona, Damian Lukaku absence is no excuse. Modric rejoins Real Madrid squad in training. Pellegrini doubtful. And still on the Tyson Fury Joshua battle, we are looking forward to this match, and we hope that it's going to be as amazing as every fan is expecting it. And the last story on the Sporting Life, this is for Real Madrid versus Shakhtar Donetsk. Coach Chelsea missing for whatever reason. We hope that he is able to get back to the match soon. And that's all the news on Sporting Life.
All right, let's take a look at the Daily Times newspaper. We have on 2023, forget rigging, ex-INEC rec tells politicians, says election will be won at the polling units. Candidates and political parties have been admonished to perfect their campaign strategies and improve on their selling point, as there will be no room for them to rig votes in the 2023 election. A former resident electoral commissioner of the Independent National Electoral Commission in Akwa Ibom State, Barrister Mike, who gives this admonition, says election will be won or lost in the polling units. You can read more of that on page 3 of the Daily Times newspaper. Nigerian-Korean Business Forum kicks off tomorrow, and we have Ambassador Ali M. Magashi hosts the world in Seoul. So you can read all of that on page 2. NIC judgment, ASU did not engage in contempt of court, Falana replies in Gigi. Asks the federal government to stop chasing shadows. You can read that And we have another story here where we have Nigerian Korean Business Forum, which is going to hold from tomorrow to the 7th, 2022. And we can see the keynote speakers that are there featuring some very important people. So you can do well to see more. They'll be looking at oil and gas, agriculture. They'll be looking at manufacturing and also tourism, culture, and the creative industry, which is something Nigeria have so much. So I really, really look forward to that, the forum that will be holding from tomorrow. And I hope that will not just be another forum, but that we'll learn and also see how we can apply it in our own country, starting from 2023 and also to the year ahead. Still on the Daily Times newspaper, the second Niger bridge ready for use by Christmas in 2022. This is coming from the federal government. And NAS have kicked against the national honor conferred on Adamu, which you can read on page 3. And that is all on the Daily Times newspaper.
On the Times Malta newspaper, winds of change. Ministry eyes floating energy farms. You can read that on page 5. National team coach referred to police for investigation. Imperative for the association to seek guidance, and you can continue reading that on page 2. And there's a picture story where several zebra crossing on Malta's road have been painted pink as part of the Pink October November, the nationwide campaign to raise awareness on the most common female and male cancer, which is the prostate for the male and then the breast cancer for women. And I hope that more awareness will be done even in our country, because these diseases and sicknesses are not only in some part of the world. We have people suffering with these same sicknesses even here in Nigeria. So it won't be a bad thing if we start painting our streets pink to create more awareness, to tell people about it, because what people don't know is that you can be young and facing these kind of challenges. There are some misconceptions due to lack of knowledge growing up, that you feel, okay, it's only for old people and all of that. But actually, there are young women and young men who are facing this cancer and even the prostate cancer. So we need this kind of awareness in our country, because it's not a region disease. As long as you're a human being, you can face this. And for that reason, we need to also paint our own street pink to let people know. Aware them with all the basic knowledge, like what symptoms you need to go quick to the hospital, because it's just one of those diseases that when you know it on time, you can be saved. But when it's too late, it is too late. But when it's early, you can be saved and then actually have a testimony that you are cancer free and all of that. Still on the Times Malta, man behind suspect Muscat payment facing fraud claims. Muscat signed up as Bati consultant week after resigning as Prime Minister. And you can continue reading that story and whatever is happening in Malta on page 2 and on the Times Malta newspaper. And that's all the news and story we have there.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for doing this with me. Thank you to our crew members. And that is where we have to call it a wrap on the program, the Dailies. Until we come your way again, to have a blessed day ahead.